You come to me now, but you don't come as a friend. You never call. You never invite me for a cup of coffee. But when you need me, oh Godfather, do a shootout between the TWSBIs. Oh Godfather, refuel these pens, then you know where to find me, huh? But otherwise, I never hear from you. What's that? What's it all about? At least you can show me some respect, huh? Pazzo.
Well, you show me enough respect, because I think it's time for another fountain pen shootout. That's right, and today we're going to talk about two pens. Now, a lot of people have requested this shootout, and for a reason. We've had the TWSBI Diamond 540 for quite a while now, and now we finally have the TWSBI Vac700, a vacuum filler. I've reviewed this pen, and I've reviewed this pen. So don't expect a full-blown review. Today I'll compare the two pens. Okay, first of all, size. There isn't such a big size difference, actually. As you can see, they're pretty much the same size. The Vac700 looks a bit bigger. I think that's mostly because of the cap, which is quite a bit bigger, as you can see here. But for the real pens, the difference isn't that large. There isn't such a big difference. What is a difference, of course, is the filling system, right? The Vac700 uses this vacuum system. I'll show you that in action in a second. And the TWSBI 540 uses a piston filler. Both are clear demonstrators, but the big difference is the nib. I think that is really what sets these two pens apart. Here we have the Vac700, and this is the 540. As you can see, the nib on the Vac700 is quite a bit larger. It really makes a difference. However, it's also quite a bit drier. I've heard this from a lot of people now who had to do some stuff to make their pen wetter. There's a couple of things you can do. You can use some nylon pliers and put them here and squeeze, and then the tines, sorry, you have to put the pen down, then the tines, they will open up a bit, and that will give you a wetter pen. I did something else. I'll show you that later on when I take the pens apart and do a writing sample. And that really helped. Again, I warn you at this point, it involves bending the nib a little bit. If you're not comfortable with doing that, don't try it, please. And definitely, this is very important, I accept no responsibility. So if you do what I'm going to show you and you ruin your pen, don't come complaining to me. I've given you fair warning. I was willing to risk it, but you take a bit of a risk. So, you know, okay. Something I didn't say in the demonstration, I realized, is that when you do this procedure, try to make sure the tines stay aligned. There is a full video on this. I think the person is called SNEN Newton. Well, I'll put a link to the video in the description of this video, and then you can check it out at your leisure and just, try to do what that guy did. It worked for me, but it involves bending the nib. Enough warnings. Which pen holds more ink? Well, I think Brian Goulet did a test, or someone else did a test. I think with regular filling, I'm not absolutely sure, I think with the regular fill, the 540 holds more ink, but you can do a little trick with the Vac700 and then that will hold a bit more ink, I think. But actually, if you just use the normal filling sequence, I think both pens hold a large amount of ink. Don't forget that even this one, even though it doesn't fill the barrel up all the way, it's a pretty wide barrel and it holds a lot of ink. Okay, so we've got the size, we've got the difference in nib. So this nib was actually made by Bock, Peter Bock from Germany, who makes a lot of nibs for the big players. I think he does Visconti and some other large brands. So we've got that covered. Both pens with a little trick. Even this one writes well. It's not a wet writer, so if you want that, you have to get this pen. It's that simple. But it's an okay writer. I like them both. Interesting, nice design. Which one to choose? Well, for me, there's no doubt. The 540. I think it's a more pleasant pen to use. Mine wrote straight away. I heard some other people who had issues with it being dry. for me that wasn't so much of an issue actually. I think this is a wetter pen. I think it's a somewhat smooth, well, not a smoother writer, but a wetter writer in any case. I like the grip a bit more. I think it's a little more pleasant to hold. They're both nice. I'm getting ink on here, sorry. They're both pleasant to hold, but I think actually the TWSBI Diamond 540, although the grip section seems to be a bit smaller, it has a little less girth, I think it's a bit more pleasant to hold, but that's because of the shape. That's a completely personal thing though. So I think, although this was an interesting comparison, it's much more interesting to show you how the two pens ride side by side, and then you can form your own opinion. And that's all there's to it. So, you know what I would choose, but maybe you would have a different choice. It doesn't really matter. So we show you how to disassemble both pens. I've already shown you how to disassemble the 540 in another video in which I compare it to the Lamy Vista. Check that one out if you want more details. I'll go through it quickly in this the second part of this video. This one, I'll show you how to disassemble it. There are many more videos out there online. The Fountain Pen Geeks did it. I think Brian Goulet did it. In any case, more videos on how to disassemble it. So if you can't follow what I do, check out the other videos. And that's all there's to it. So, on to the writing sample. I hope this was useful. I'll see you later. Any questions? Comment. Bye-bye. Okay, the TWSBI Diamond 540 versus the TWSBI Vac700. It's sort of a tradition that I show you how to disassemble these pens in the shootouts. Of course, I've already done that for the 540, but just extremely briefly. So if you want to see this in more detail, you can just check out my TWSBI Diamond 540 versus Lamy Vista shootout. So the idea is that you can disassemble this whole thing. Now, for now, what I do is I'll just leave this whole piston unit in one piece, but you can disassemble everything you see here. But again, I don't want to waste your time, so if you're interested in how to do it, I'd say check out my Lamy Vista versus TWSBI Diamond 540 shootout. Okay, so I'll put that back together again. There we go. Alright, good enough. So, there you have it. 540, now the Vac700. I'm definitely not the first one to disassemble this. There are other videos online, but just for the sake of completeness, the cap, the section just unscrews. Here we have another bit. You can take out the nib and the feed. Now what I would recommend you to do, you can unscrew this, but if you start screwing on the nib and the feed, you may disturb the alignment between the feed and the nib. So a tip by Richard Binder is to hold the pen like this and then unscrew this bit. That way the nib and the feed are gripped securely by your fingers and you won't misalign them. Now even if you do, so you can take the actual grip off, then you can unscrew this bit and then you have the nib collar in your hand and you can pull out the feed and the nib. Here we have the nib collar. There is an O-ring. In fact, there are two O-rings right there. You can leave those in place. You can add some silicone grease, etc. Now, the barrel, you can open up the blind cap like that. You can, I think it's easiest if you sort of hold this in place a little bit. Take your TWSBI wrench again, and this time you actually unscrew it by turning to the left. With the 540 it's actually screwing to the right, which is a bit counterintuitive to me. So here we go. You cannot do much about this. So this is the piston is a one-piece unit, I think. I've been unable to disassemble that, but no, it's not really necessary. When you clean it out, remember there's going to be ink under this ring. So clean that well, otherwise your inks may mix later on. So we have a piston unit, a barrel, a section, and a little ring. We have the nib collar, the feed, and the nib, and that's all there's to it. Now, the interesting thing here is that with this pen you can move around the nib and the feed a bit. The 540 nib and feed sort of click into place, and that is not really the case with the Vac700. Let me see, one bit of the nib collar is a bit wider, and that's of course where the nib goes. You have to fiddle around a bit. Now push it back all the way in. It's easy to stop at some point and think, oh yeah, it's in, but then you probably get a leak. So make sure it's pushed all the way in, and then the shoulders of the nib and the feed align pretty well. So I'm not sure whether this close-up adds anything, but you can see they're pretty well aligned. That's a good thing. So if you push both of them in all the way, then they should be positioned the right way. Now you can move the nib and the feed around a bit. That's what I just showed you. So now it's not entirely dead center, the feed, and that's what may happen if you screw this thing on. So here we go again, and then again I hold the nib and the feed, and then I screw on the section, and when it's in there, it's in there. Don't over tighten it. It is plastic, it will crack. Okay, here we go. Put the piston back in. Actually, I think this piston isn't moving too smoothly, so I'll just use this opportunity to add a little dab of silicone grease. This is the stuff by the Goulet Pen Company. You can pick it up in a number of places, but I think their silicone grease is excellent. You don't want to have too much, just the right amount. Might as well add a little bit to these screw threads. There we go. Okay, now I need another cloth. Don't wipe your fingers with silicone grease in your ink cloth, because if this contacts with the nib or the feed, it will actually hamper ink flow. There we go. Push this back in. Yep, smooth. You can use a little wrench there. There we go. Again, don't over tighten it. It's really not necessary. There we have it. Okay. Ink them up, do a writing sample. Oh no, wait, I would first show you what I did to my nib. Well, it's a very simple thing. I didn't invent this. There was someone online who recommended this. I can put a link to his video in the description of my shootout. First of all, this is not for the faint of heart, because you're going to bend your nib. That's right, you bend the nib. So, what he recommends is you put the nib against the barrel of a pen, you put your finger on it, and you gently push this part of the pen up, like that. But then, of course, when it's aligned like this. And that's a nice way. You put some pressure with your thumb, and that way your nib is bent up slightly. Of course, you don't want to overdo it. You don't want your nib to be curled upwards. And as you can see, I'll try to give you a close-up. My nib is bent upward a little bit, but it's really not much. And even this little amount of upward, what do you call that, benditure? I'm not even sure if that's a word, but this little bit was enough to make the pen flow smoother. Now, you are going to work on your nib, you're going to bend it. If you're afraid to do that, then don't do it. If you think you may ruin your nib, then don't do it. And if you ruin anything, don't come complaining to me, because I have now given you fair warning. You are intervening with your nib, and that's all there's to it. So if you're not up to it, please don't do it and send your nib off to a nib meister. Right, inking up the pens. First, the TWSBI Diamond 540. Cap. There we go. Then the Vac700. Whoop, there we go. I leave the blind cap slightly unscrewed because I'm going to do some writing with it right now. Well, there we go. Here we have the TWSBI Diamond 540. Remember, this is a broad nib. And here we have TWSBI Vac700, and this is a medium nib. Now, as you can see, this actually was the writing sample from my earlier video, and the Vac700 has become quite a bit wetter with my simple nib intervention. Let's do a bit of writing. Still, it is not nearly as wet as the 540. Oh, the Quick Fox. The lazy brown dog then, I guess. See, nice wetness, good line, no skipping, like it. The Vac700. That was on purpose too. Whoops, sorry. That was on purpose. I wiped the to see how quick it would dry. You see, it's quite a bit drier, right? It's not as bold a line. Now, it is a medium, not a broad, but still. I think that'll be also pronounced when I do some coloring. You see, it's not bad, but you see it's a bit lighter. It's just less ink, it's less saturated. So, 540, Vac700. You see the difference in wetness in the color of the ink, right? Okay. Maybe we should check out some flecks side by side. Some people make their 540 nib a bit flexier. I haven't done that. But as you can see, I do get quite some line variation. The Vac700. Oh, that's there too. Not as pronounced, but it is there. Okay, so I think that concludes our business here. Two nice pens. If you ask me right now which one is my absolute favorite, I would say the 540. I think it's just a little smoother. It's definitely wetter. Now, I mean, I know you can make this the Vac700 a bit wetter, but why isn't it wet when it leaves the factory? I mean, I understand there are some differences in opinion on how wet you like your pens, etc. Some individual differences, but this pen, the Vac700, was so dry that when I got it, it hardly wrote. I really had to do some interventions there. So I didn't have any of the likes with the 540. So for me, this is the ultimate pen. This one is really cool. The Vac700 with its nice, fancy vacuum filling mechanism. I think it's very nice, very fun pen. But if I were to choose, this one would be it. So there you have it, a shootout between the Vac700 and the TWSBI Diamond 540. I hope this was useful, and I'll see you later. Bye bye.